with people who it's like vulnerable populations. So this may be a helpful presentation for you. So the body keeps the score, the introduction to trauma and its hidden effects on our life and our personal development. So our agenda, we're going to get into ACEs, okay, adverse childhood experiences, short-term trauma effects, long-term trauma effects, and then noticing and like taking control. So what to do with all of the information, like that's the what now, okay, of what we're going to be talking about in that portion of the presentation. And then I'm going to share with you just a couple resources, and then we're going to close it. As a reminder, if you have questions while I'm going through the presentation, you can share your questions in the chat, or you can share it at the end when I'm going to ask about questions as well. But, you know, it's meant to be the conversation form. And if you have a question, you know, I'll chime in. So our introduction, a situation that causes an unhappy memory that affects your actions. This is the definition of trauma, okay? So trauma is a situation that causes an unhappy memory and affects your actions. So it has to be something that changes the trajectory of something of you in a way where it's not a welcoming feeling. It's not something that feels the best, okay? And that's where being able to find the difference between what is a traumatic event and what's not a traumatic event, because we're going to find in the presentation, you know, what one person sees as being traumatic for them, another person may not see it as being traumatic for them, okay? Because it is very subjective. So that's why it's important to have in that piece of something that causes an unhappy memory, okay? So what one person sees as being trauma, another person may not see it as being trauma, and that is very subjective. So to one person, having an absent father can feel traumatic to them, right? Another person, it cannot feel traumatic if that father was abusive to them, for example, right? So to them, having an absent father was a blessing to them, and it wasn't seen as being traumatic to them. So it just depends on us as a person, what affects us as being traumatic. It may not affect another person. So it is important to look at trauma from that perspective as well, because it can be easy to go by our own personal experiences, what we've, you know what I'm saying, seen and gone through. So when we see or hear someone else going through it, we find ourselves having more sympathy than we do empathy in the situation. And we feel bad for people who don't see themselves as being, you know, a victim or in a tough situation. So it is important to, you know the difference between how trauma can show up in different individuals, and know that it is something that a person has to identify with. If they want to choose to not identify with it, then that is their right to not identify with something being traumatic to them. And it could also even be down to two siblings who went through the same things, but one sibling took a negative energy from it and they see it as being very traumatic, and another sibling didn't. Okay. There's nothing wrong with the perception of either one of the siblings. It is from their own personal subjective experience. Okay. So that is important to know and understand when it comes to trauma. So everything that we've gone through, it's molded us into who we've become. Okay. So whether we see something as being a traumatic experience or not, everything that we've experienced, everything that we've seen, everything that we've heard, it has had some type of an effect on how we have been molded into society, how we have been molded into being ourselves, and it affects our mental, our emotional, and our physical health. Okay. And that could be in a positive or a negative way. So with my dissertation work, you all know that trauma is a part of my specialty area. And I've come to find that from with my research topic that's looking at special education teachers who've experienced childhood trauma and their effects of teaching students who have behavioral problems who also have experienced trauma. And one thing I've come to learn is that a lot of them, they found ways to like disassociate with the traumatic experience and turn it around into being like a motivating factor for why they chose to be a teacher or for why they chose to give back and help other people. It was because of their own personal traumatic experiences. So trauma can push a person to want to give back and help other people and be more sensitive, or it can push them into being toxic as hell. Okay. So, when they say hurt people, that's not the same for all people. So that saying is not always correct. Because someone can go through the same trauma and behave differently. It just depends on that person and that person's energy and what else they are being influenced by. So all hurt people do not hurt people. Okay. All hurt people do not hurt people. So it is important that we do add in that piece of difference in there with that saying. And those who choose to hurt people are those who hurt people. Okay. So ACEs is a big background of today's presentation. And so ACEs stands for adverse childhood experiences, i.e. childhood trauma. Okay. Now the ACEs is a standard tool that has been used for years. So since 1995 as a way to measure trauma and the potential future health effects that a person may go through. Insurance companies actually use these methods as a way to look at their pricing structures and their premiums, because it said that if a person has gone through certain traumas or the amount of certain life experiences, so whether this person accepts it as being a trauma or not, they know that scientifically it still has an effect on a person's behavior and their risky behavior. And so that can affect premiums. Okay. If they say that people who have dealt with physical abuse are at a 70% higher chance than those who haven't to go through heart problems, that's a financial risk to that health company. Okay. So they're going to adjust their premiums accordingly, which is why the companies ask the type of questions and things that they ask, because trauma is considered in some ways a pre-existing condition, believe it or not. Believe it or not, a lot of medical practices are beginning to use trauma as a pre-existing condition as they make their decisions and how they utilize care and working with them. And that's why there's a lot more questions on those intake forms and things of that nature about trauma and life experiences that you've gone through, because they are measuring that out to get a take on you and to basically make an assessment or an assumption on how your life may turn out or what type of care or help you may need in the long term. Interesting, right? Did y'all know that? Let me know in the comments too, but it's quite interesting when we dig into it, just how the system operates in general. But all right, so what are ACEs, average childhood experiences? So this was a study that was completed in 1995 by the Kaiser Foundation in connection with the CDC. So the Kaiser Foundation, put it together. They worked with the insurance companies, with the HMOs. And so it was with over 17,000 people who were connected with an HMO that they utilized this questionnaire with to learn more about them. A lot of the people in the survey were over 60 years old. It was like, oh my gosh, like 60-70% of the people were over 60 years old. So they were able to track, these were people that they were able to track their different health conditions that they had gone through over the course of their life. And so they correlated their personal responses to traumatic experiences with their health problems that they had gone through to come up with all of this. Okay. So it was primarily white individuals in this study. Okay. And that's a whole nother thing when it comes to private insurance policies and things of that nature and the race breakdown of that. But they were primarily white. So 75% of the participants were white. With college education, 75% had reported attended at least one college class, but 40% of the participants graduated from college. And then 54% were women, and that's making the 46% men. Okay. And the majority were of age, but they ranged in age from 18 to 72. They did find a correlation between traumatic experiences and health outcomes with this study, which is why this study is like literally the foundation of all things trauma currently. Now, there have been new tools and things that have been created over time to bring a new picture to trauma, but the ACEs study is still one of the biggest staples in the community of trauma right now at this time. All medical professionals still use this as an indicator when it comes to working with their clients, okay, or their patients. And so, yeah, it's still widely used today. Now, the way ACEs works is as the ACEs score of an individual increases, the more likely they were to experience at least one of the following experiences in their adulthood. So, and it's not just these, but these were the primary indicators that they use. But alcohol and drug use, depression, heart disease, unwanted pregnancies, unhealthy promiscuity, and a lower quality of life. Okay. So these were the life experiences that were said that they will live if they had gone through ACEs experiences. And the more ACEs experiences they had gone through, the higher of a chance it was for them to experience one of these. And so you can do some self-assessment with yourself. The purpose of this is to dive into it and to do self-assessment. And so we are going to be taking the ACEs assessment here. Is only 10 questions, okay? And so we're going to be taking it for you to have a self-assessment to see what the actual questionnaire is, to see where you measure with it. We're going to talk about the results, and then we're going to get into the short-term and the long-term trauma. So it is said that an estimated 1 in 5 people have 3 or more identified adverse childhood experiences. Okay. About 20%. But that's actually, this was at the time of this study. It is now suspected that 3 to 4 out of 5 people, y'all. And especially with the onset of COVID and the increase of racism, sexism, and all of that, has been added to the ACEs aspect. So this study, it does not include racism, sexism, death, or the aspect of witnessing death, and then spiritual trauma as well, because a lot of people go through spiritual trauma. And so this was not included in this study, but there have been newer studies that have been aiming at adding these indicators onto the adverse childhood experiences as well, to get a more what's it called, up to date view. Okay, because this study is what, 18 years old. So it's, wait, no, my counting is off. Wait, 28. I said 18, 28 years old. And so it is 28 years old, and people are looking at updating it now. So there's 3 different types of ACEs when it comes to breaking down trauma. They have abuse, neglect, and then household dysfunction were the primary indicators that they use. So physical and emotional and sexual abuse, physical and emotional neglect. And then within the household dysfunction, they counted mental illness, incarceration, the treatment of the mother, because we remember how we've been talking about in class, divine feminine energy is heavy and strong, and that has a strong effect on the children more than masculine energy does. Okay, so that's why they measured the treatment of the mother and not the treatment of the father. But new studies are including it to be just treatment of a parent in general. But they had substance abuse, and then they also had divorce. So possible risk outcomes were the lack of physical activity, smoking, alcoholism, drug use, and missed work. So calling off a lot of work because you're, what I'm saying, being triggered, or not at your, best state of health. So you're having to call off. Now, the physical and mental health aspects of it can be severe obesity, diabetes, depression, suicide attempts, STDs, heart disease, cancer, stroke, COPD, and broken bones. And a lot of this is because it is said that when you have experienced trauma, you live a more riskier life sometimes, or your mental health is affected. So for example, the STDs could come from over promiscuity and not being safe about it. Okay, so you're going to be at a higher risk. Broken bones could be from like car accidents, so people who have no fear, so they do a lot of daredevil type stuff, okay, because they have nothing to really, whatever, that can be a cause of from trauma as well. The stroke, we know that comes from high blood pressure, stress, all of that affects our blood work, our blood flow in our body. That definitely can come from trauma, aneurysms, things of that nature. And then basically our body has a hard time processing things and breaking down things when we've been affected by trauma. So we're gonna take it together. So you just need a piece of paper and a pencil, because you're just gonna mark like number one, yes or no, number two, yes or no. Okay. So I'm gonna give you like 30 seconds to get like or you can use your phone, like the notes in your phone if you want to. But we're gonna take about 30 seconds for you to get something to write with, and then we're gonna do the assessment together. I just wanna rock you all night long. Oh, I wanna rock you. I wanna rock you, baby. I wanna be your baby. Come on and be my baby. I wanna be your lady. Baby, let me rock with you. You know I wanna rock with you. All right, we're about to get ready to get started. So there's 10 different questions, and you're basically just going to look at each one of the questions and share what you identify with and what you don't identify with, okay? All right. So, starting at number 1, and I want you to think about this prior to your 18th birthday, because this is childhood trauma, okay? So, prior to your 18th birthday, you want to ask yourself to answer these questions, okay? So, number 1, did you feel that you didn't have enough to eat, had to wear dirty clothes, or had no one to protect or take care of you? Yes or no? Number 2, did you lose a parent through divorce, abandonment, death, or any other reason? Yes or no? Number 3, did you live with anyone who was depressed, mentally ill, or attempted suicide? Yes or no? Number 4, did you live with anyone who had a problem with drinking or using drugs, including prescription drugs? Yes or no? Number 5, did your parents or adults in your home ever hit, punch, beat, or threaten to harm each other? Yes or no? All right, number 6, Did you live with anyone who went to jail or prison? Yes or no? Number 7. Did a parent or adult in your home ever swear at you, insult you, or put you down? Yes or no? Number 9. Did you feel that no one in your family loved you or thought you were special? Oh, wait, did I do number 8? Did a parent or adult in your home ever hit, beat, kick, or physically hurt you in any way? And then number 10, did you experience unwanted sexual contact, such as fondling or oral, anal, vaginal intercourse, or penetration? So now you're going to add up how many yeses you have. Add up how many yeses you have. And that is going to be your ACEs score. And so just do a quick self assessment and ask yourself, do you believe that the experience has affected your health in any way? Do you feel or believe that these experiences have affected your health in any way? Just from some self assessment. And then we're about to go through the effects of it. Thank you for sharing. Yeah, this was a very interesting one for me when I first took it and realized how many aces I had. I was like, "Oh my god. I can't believe how many aces I have." Like it just I just couldn't believe it, you know. I couldn't believe it. But it makes sense though. So it makes sense. But now we're about to get into, and you remember where I said it's just a part of your life story. It doesn't mean that anything is wrong with us, you know. So these were the results of the story study of the people who took it. So 28%. So when it comes to abuse, the majority of the people, 28%, reported physical abuse. When it comes to neglect, the majority reported emotional neglect. When it comes to household dysfunction, 26, almost 27% reported household substance abuse. Then divorce, then mental illness. Oops. Then divorce, then mental illness, and then mother being treated unfairly, and then the incarcerated family member. So this was the results from when the people that took it. You can kind of like measure out or look at, you know, what your results was in regards to or in relationship to everyone else's. All right, so let's get into the short term traumatic effects and what it can have on us in the short term or on other people, because this is helpful when it comes to us assessing working with other people as well. The more we know, the more informed we are in our communications. Okay. So, short term traumatic effects, it can affect our short term memory loss, okay? Our ability to remember what we walked into the room for, okay? And a lot of that is because trauma affects our amygdala. And we're going to get into that. I think I wrote that down in the long term effects, but that affects, wait, not even just the amygdala, it's the Goodness gracious, it's another part of the brain. Oh gosh. I'm gonna have to pull it up to remind myself the name of it, but it's long. Okay, I'm gonna pull it up and I'm gonna share the name of it. But anyway, so it affects the part of our brain that deals with our memory. And with that memory, if it's tainted or there's something coming in messing with the receptors of it, we're going to have issues. Okay. And so that's how trauma can show up when it comes to our short term memory. So, for example, like that fidgeting kid who can't never remember anything and they always jumping and stuff, right? Like they're afraid and they're nervous or whatever the case is. A lot of that is because of trauma. Children who have stuttering problems, sometimes that is from some level of trauma. And kids can get trauma from being in the womb. Okay, that is another thing that we don't really be realizing and talking about as much, but we can have trauma from the womb, the development inside of the womb. Okay, and that depends on the things that the mother went through while the mother was pregnant. Okay. And so that is very important to have as an understanding as well. Okay. Hermit mode. So, short term traumatic effects can have a person disappearing, not wanting to be around people. So, if something happens, all of a sudden you just disappear from the world, not letting anyone into your space. That can be a short time traumatic effect as well, where people, we choose to run away versus going towards what I'm saying we need to be going towards to help heal. We may run away from it or shut ourselves out from it. And the parts of the brain that I was talking about was the prefrontal and the temporal cortex, y'all. It can affect how we make decisions based off our experiences. So when we maneuver based off of what we've gone through, it can affect our decision making. It can affect us acting out or even looking for attention. So are we acting out, or even with kids when they start acting out and looking for attention? It can come to the point where kids don't care if they get. It don't matter how they get attention, whether if it's getting a whooping, getting yelled at, or whatever the case is, they're still getting attention. Okay. And so that's something that we got to make sure we're paying attention to on what we give attention to, because they're going to keep doing it. So for example, that's why I just stopped feeding into like that Krishan stuff and all of that, because the reality is that at this point it's attention seeking. If I know that I get more attention by acting out and doing this type of vibrational stuff versus when I'm doing good things, people overlook me, I'm going to do the things that gives me attention, because when I get attention, I get paid. Okay. And that's why we have a lot of people online doing shit. Okay. Because people, us as consumers, we give attention to the shit of the people who's looking for attention versus the ones who are on that straight and narrow. And then we get upset. I'm tired of this. I'm tired of seeing this all out. Well, stop watching it. Stop giving it our attention. And it'll go away eventually. Okay. And so that's something that we're taught when it comes to teaching. When a student is acting out in the classroom, we don't just say, stop what you're doing, like stop what we're doing, to tell them to stop what they're doing. We use other clues and things, and we get them to do what is the wanted behavior, and then we give them the attention. Okay. Disassociation is another thing where you start to disassociate yourself with what happened, and you start to find ways to process it and re-identify it, redefine it as to what it means and how it potentially showed up and why it had to happen. So this one a lot of times can come in where we be like, God's will is God's will, and we start to disassociate from what happened and make it basically make sense. Disassociation is the sense of making it make sense to take away the pain. It can cause an inability to focus or just find yourself fidgeting all over the place. Similar to trauma has similar effects as ADHD actually. So I know we have a lot of adults who are coming out saying that they feel they have, undiagnosed ADHD. And in some way, it could be unaddressed or unhealed trauma that's causing these effects as well, because our amygdala, our prefrontal, and our frontal cortex are being affected at this time. That deals with our memory, that it deals with our reaction time. Flashbacks, okay? Having flashbacks to traumatic events and situations that have happened um after, immediately after it happens. Now, over time, the flashbacks slow down, but they still can happen, okay? But in the beginning, they are more prevalent most times when it comes to serious events. Irritability, okay? Finding yourself being irritated all the time, not wanting to deal with certain things. That could be a sense of short-term traumatic effect. So a lot of, when they say, for example, push out, it's a book that talks about the push out of Black girls in education systems and the misdiagnosing. And so they always want to say the little girl is being grown, or she got an attitude problem, or this is, they always are harder on Black girls, right? But some of these could be effects and symptoms of trauma that they've gone through that's causing us to be this um be this person who feels like we can't mess up. You know what I'm saying? And having all that pressure on you can cause a lot of irritability. I was this little girl, okay? A lot of people did not like me as a little girl, like, because I was bossy, but a lot of that they didn't realize I was raising three siblings at the age of 8, okay? I didn't have a childhood. Um had gone through a lot of traumatic experiences by that time. And so a lot of my attitude problems and the acting out was simply because I'm trying to navigate this life as a kid while I'm also being responsible for other kids. Okay. And so trauma can show up in a lot of different ways. And when we see people with attitude problems and things of that nature, it does better when it comes to trauma to ask what happened to you versus what's wrong with you. What happened? What caused you to be like this? Okay. So, the long term effects of trauma. So, these are more of the long term effects of what may be with us when it comes to our health and things of that nature. It affects our amygdala. Okay. Our amygdala is like our brain smoke detector. Okay. It tells our brain um, there's trouble ahead. You may want to fix some things. You may want to pay attention to this. Something isn't right. Uh-oh, watch out. Trauma can affect that in our head. So it can so it can basically take the smoke detector's battery out. So, when that battery start beep, 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 see that as being the trauma. Okay? The trauma is that irritating ass beep. Okay? Now, we can heal and address it by putting a new battery in it. Okay. Or we can just take the whole battery out. So now you ain't got no smoke detector. So now you don't know what the hell is going on. So now you don't know when nothing is an issue or a problem. And so trauma can do that. It can cause you to make decisions that are not always the best effect for you. Okay. It has similar effects to ADHD. I already mentioned that, but in the long term, you could be getting treated for ADHD when it's really trauma that's just affecting you and your inability to focus. It can cause mental health conditions and serious health conditions and organ failure, actually, because our body is over processing those different stimulants. It becomes too much on our body. Delayed cognitive development, depression, uncontrollable body functions, and unwanted behaviors can be something that happens in this long term effects of trauma as well. So it can affect our learning processes, it can slow it down. children who've gone through trauma. So we hear a lot about, for example, people going through different, sexual trauma. They may stop talking. So then their social skills are not being developed. Okay. Their brain is not being developed as much because they're not participating in the process. And so these can be some of the long-term effects. Your body's not working the way that it, used to. You got all these pains and aches, but it's psychological. From, you remember that prefrontal cortex that I was talking about on how it affects the brain, okay? And because a lot of that, it deals with the sense of being able to concentrate, right? It also deals with how you read what's going on in front of you. Reenacting. Okay, so now this goes into, y'all remember when we were talking about the whole hurt people? So reenactment can go different ways. Okay, reenactment can go in a way of someone who has been traumatized becoming the traumatizer. So for example, R. Kelly, he was messed with, he was abused, he went through all these other things. So what did he become? An abuser. His amygdala got changed, his prefrontal cortex got changed. So how he viewed life and the world around him was different because of his own personal experiences that changed his reality. Okay. And when we look at it from that perspective, it helps us have a better understanding of how people are created and how our socialization affects us and our outcome, which is why a lot of people who have been traumatized and they have no sense of boundaries and they haven't healed and worked through their own shit, and especially the ones who, when the culprit of their trauma doesn't get, any type of punishment and stuff, this person can become that person who traumatized them. So they seek relationships where they do similar things that happen to them. We see this with kids a lot, for example. So a lot of kids who are very sexualized at a young age, that's typically with other children who have been sexualized, other children who have gone through who have been sexualized, who have been sometimes abused. So then now they're showing these things to their friends. Oh, it's nothing wrong. It just means that we're friends. We love each other. They're repeating back the things that the person who traumatized them said to them. Now, it can also go into the form of someone who's been traumatized, and so they seek relationships where they can be kind of like the superhero. So they're helping people who are going through or have gone through things that are similar to them. Okay. So a lot of us do this one. I know I do this in a lot of ways, okay? When it comes to giving back and wanting to help other people, showing up for other people, is because I remember the things that I went through and what I experienced, and I want to make sure that I'm showing something different to other people, okay? And so we can put it in so many different angles when it comes to trauma and how it shows up in our life. But in a lot of ways, the people that be traumatizing and hurting other people is because it happened to them. Unfortunately, it's a cycle. It's like a parasite. It can deal with unhealthy attachments. So you go to all these abusive relationships because your mama was abusive, your daddy was abusive. So now you're attached to other people who are also abusive. Or you become abusive to other people, or you become codependent, become needy on other people, or you become the narcissist where you just use people. Okay. And it can also come in the form of delusions. So delusions are the sense of, you change the story. You change the story of what really happened to you. redefine it, um, put it out of your head. And a lot of people do this as well. They begin to see things. They begin to see things that are not there, defining things that are not there. But this was their way to start coping through what really happened to them. They start identifying differently in response to the traumas that have happened to them. Okay. And sometimes they begin to identify as their oppressor. And so this was something that um my dad said he noticed a lot. So my dad used to be a prison guard, and he was talking about like the differences of what he noticed of like the men, and how a lot of them had been, the same ones who had raped other people and things of that nature, they had been raped themselves. And how they started to be delusional within their thinking, and it changed how they view life in general, so they didn't see what they were doing as being wrong because they had been brainwashed. Okay. Or even he was talking about within the women facility, a lot of the women who were gay, they were mentioning how they were abused when they were children. Same thing with the men. They were abused as children. And so it made them look at their sexual orientation differently because of what happened in their developmental phases of their life. Like that shit is real. What our children take in and see when they're younger, they become to internalize it. That's how we are all socialized. That's the social learning theory. That's why curriculum keeps getting changed with each generation. If y'all know, well, if you're not in education, you don't see it directly, but really look at your kids' work, what they're doing in schools, the things that they're teaching. A lot of it is propaganda, but that's a whole nother conversation to have. I hope this session has been helpful for you all. I feel like a lot of people may not be interested in this session, but those of you all who have been interested in it and you're enjoying it, I do thank you for being here. I know talking about trauma is not always a pretty thing. So, what do we do now? Okay, so we know all these things about trauma. We know how it can affect us. We know how it can show up in us and how it can show up in the abusers, how it can change us. But now let's take a quick look at what now, what to do with this information, because I'm always about solutions and what can we do with what we know. Okay. So we can't know what to focus on without first going within to see how the experiences that we went through have affected us in the first place. Okay. So basically, we got to go within. We got to do self assessments. We got to look at our behaviors. We have to ask us, okay, where did this behavior start? What caused this? When did I start finding myself liking this? When did I find myself jumping in this manner? What caused this? You know what I'm saying? Like really asking ourselves these questions, the real questions. But don't just talk about it, but be intentional. Everything that you do, be intentional. Okay. So that's why I had to stop watching a lot of people who would just talk about the things that people were doing to you, what happened, how it affected you, but there were no solutions. There were no solutions. There were no end things on what you can do to change the trajectory of it. Okay. And one of the sources that I use for my dissertation it's a book called The Body Keeps the Score, actually, where the title of this session kind of came from. It talks about trauma and how our effects of trauma, stays within us. I didn't talk a lot about the book within this presentation per se, but a lot of the concepts are within the book. But one of the things that he do talk about within the book is the sense of being intentional. So he talked about why is it that some people can be in therapy for years? You hear me? Years, and never make any progress in their life or their ability to cope in life. Why is it that someone can be in therapy for years but still not be able to cope with what is going on in life around them? And you want to know the reason for that? is because it is found that just talking about what happened, just getting it out, venting, and all of that doesn't do shit. Okay. It just keeps making the wound open. We got to process through it and identify a solution for how to combat it. Okay. And that's what makes the work different. So that's why I had to stop watching and listening to a lot of creators who just talk about the oppression of the people and what the world is doing to us and what the government is doing to us. Okay, this is happening. Okay, this is happening. The government is doing this. This is happening. But what the hell is it going to do for me? What the hell is that going to do for me right now living in the 3D? Okay. I can't just go up against the government. So what does this really look like? What are the end goals? What is the intentions behind everything of what we are doing at this time? You feel me? And I actually just made a post on, it was the membership tab. I end up not putting it for public. I put it in the membership tab, but it was a status, and it said timeline and dimension hopping is good and all until you hop into one that is a direct opposition to the 3D world that your physical body is currently in. This is what makes many spiritualists experience the process of losing their mind or going crazy in the spiritual world. What good is knowledge if it's not helping you experience the 3D? We want to merge, not separate. Okay. And so this gives the energy of when it comes to trauma, shadow work, the difficult things, don't engage in that unless there's some form of solution of how to deal with it. Because if not, you're going to have an open wound with no solutions to that wound. So you want to find ways to merge your shadow and your light. So what you've gone through is your experience and it matters. So how can you merge your experience with life and how you live now so that your light and your shadow is there and you are aware of its effects on you? It's not affecting you and you're not aware of it, okay? You have to reprogram your mind and your energy. We have to reprogram our mind and our energy. So only way we can reprogram our mind is by first getting to the core. We have to first get to the core of what our program is in the first place. What is our mind's program in the first place? Okay. What is our mind's program in the first place? If we don't know our mind's program, then we don't know what we need to combat. You get what I'm saying? And only way we can figure out our mind's program is by taking it to the basics and seeing. It's kind of like it's giving your moon sign energy. Okay. What are the things that make you up? What are the things that created you to be who you are today? Okay. Those are your ingredients. So now you need to go through your ingredient list and see which ingredients are still good for you or which ingredients you may want to, change up. Do you want to change out the dairy milk for the almond milk? You get what I'm saying? Do you want to change out shit, I don't know. Okay. Do you want to change out whatever for whatever? Finding a healthy alternative. But you got to first understand your programming. And that's why I've been doing the 365 days of journaling. The purpose of all of that has been to help the collective understand our personal programming through all facets of our life. Because with the understanding of our personal programming, we are then able to have a better understanding of what needs to be changed and how we can change it. Okay. And this is why I love my dissertation work. Like, I really want to find a way to turn my dissertation work into classes and trainings and stuff, but we're going to figure out how to do this because trauma is really big right now at this time. And I've been sharing this in a lot of readings, what was going to be going on in the world, because people are not paying attention to their shadow the way that they need. So it's been taken over. And everything that I said was going to happen has been happening, even on down to the increase of self deletions. You get what I'm saying? A lot of people have been self deleting because not having healthy outlets with dealing with things. But we gonna change it. We gonna change it. That's fine. My spirit is telling me I think I might actually make this class public. I feel like a lot of people need to hear this class. But redefine yourself and reset your personal life timeline. So, you remember how I said trauma only affects us as trauma if we define it as so? This is the same thing. You have to redefine who you are, know who you are, redefine who you are in order to be able to reset your personal life timeline. And you know what I'm saying? Like, what timeline are you on? Living strictly in the 3D is not healthy when your physical body is in the 3D. You don't want to live just in the 3D, okay? At all. Same thing with trauma. Knowing the traumas, talking about the traumas and what has happened, we don't want to just keep living in what has happened. How are we going to redefine it? How are we going to reset our timeline that we are on? Yes, this happened, but on that old timeline, you remember when we were talking about the disassociation earlier? The earlier timeline, you associated yourself as strictly the victim, right? But by resetting and redefining it, you see the perpetrator as being human for what got them to do what they're doing. It don't make it any better. It don't make it any more right. I ain't saying that, okay? It don't make it any more right. But by you having a new way of looking at what has happened, it allows you to redefine what you are experiencing at this time of your life to be able to take control back over your life. Because oftentimes with trauma and things that happen to us, the victim energy wants us to take the control from us and give it to somebody else. Oh, they did this. They did that. This is this issue. But we're redefining ourselves. We're redefining ourselves. We're resetting it. And only way we can redefine something is by knowing the synonyms of it. So we have to keep educating ourselves on it. Okay. And so reset your personal timeline, your life timeline, the things that have happened by you redefining what happened, how you view the situation, being honest with yourself on. So, for example, my history of sexual assault, long history of it. Okay. It caused me to be very I love sex. That was one of my outlets. Okay? That feeling brought me the sense of relief because I wasn't all the way fully healed from those traumatic experiences I went through. So instead, when I'm being triggered and need some level of healing, I want dick. I don't want to do yoga or meditation or journaling or be creative. I want dick because my trauma took me back to that feeling, you know? And so, yeah. I was like, I'm gonna leave it there because I did just say I was gonna put that. I was like, let me leave that part right there. Y'all know I'll be trying to keep from not revealing too much in my personal, but I share a lot of that in general. So a lot of you all already know that. But you want to redefine your truth and the experiences from your perspective. So take control of your life story, what you've gone through, and what you've experienced. Okay. I'm looking at y'all comments. Oh, I'm sending hugs and butterflies. Yes, Katrina. Yes, we always keep pushing therapy, therapy, therapy. But to be honest, a lot of the therapists don't really push healing because they need you to stay there. They need you to keep coming back. That's how they pay their bills. Okay. So they got to keep opening wounds with no solutions. This isn't all therapists. Okay. And this is coming from someone, I have a background in therapy. I've been trained as a therapist. And that's why I was just like, I don't like a lot of these practices. This isn't really getting to the root of the issue. Okay. We got to redefine it. And then personal coping mechanisms. So, what are your mechanisms, your coping mechanisms going to be when you're triggered in situations? When you're triggered in situations and you want to make sure that it doesn't affect you in other places of your life, how are you going to cope with when this happens? Okay. How are you going to cope when someone raises their voice at you and you get triggered to when your parent used to do it? Or when you find yourself, for example, when I was just saying, craving the D. Okay. And so then now I'm in celibacy. When I'm super stressed out or irritated or mad, I can't just run to that. I have to fix it myself. So what's that coping mechanism going to be? Not finding my worth and everything of me in another person because my trauma has pushed me in that way. I've been redefined. I've been reorganized and reprocessed to want to look at it in that manner. But yes, this was the gist of today's introduction section as we're getting deeper into working through our shadow work, okay? Because we coming out on top, period. You hear me? We are coming out on top and nothing will stop us, okay? Nothing will stop us because we're doing the work. We're putting a stop to the things that were continuously being perpetuated through time. We're breaking the generational curses. We're saying no to the things that we need to say no to, saying yes to the things we need to say yes to. We're not hiding anymore. We're taking control of our life. We're taking control of what we've experienced and what we're going through. Okay. So this was the gist of the introduction of it. Okay. Do any of you all have questions at this time? So these are two resources. I use more than these two, but these are two big resources that I kept bringing up. So I will post the link to this presentation in the comments of or the description box of this video so that you can go in and click the links to see the resources that I put on here. For you to go check out. I have the book on there, The Body Keeps the Score. I strongly recommend listening past the first chapter because when I first started reading it, when I was doing my research, and you can find actually, I think the audiobook on YouTube as well, but it was hard to get through the first chapter because they were talking a lot about medication, and I'm not a pro medication. I do understand sometimes medication is very helpful to get you to a certain place, but I'm not on the dependency of medication. And so it was kind of hard to listen to the first part, but then when I started realizing and learning